This is Leader Time by FedNet. Floor remarks by Senate Majority Leader John Thune and Democratic Leader Chuck Schumer in podcast form. On April 30th, Thune discussed regulations as both houses of Congress were poised to pass Congressional Review Act resolutions to repeal Biden administration rules. The following material is protected by copyright.
Mr. President, over the last 4 years, the Biden administration subjected Americans to an onslaught of regulations. Altogether, the Biden regulatory agenda cost $1.8 trillion. It heaped thousands of hours of paperwork on business owners, energy producers, and other hardworking Americans. And to what end? Well, often these regulations were part of the Biden administration's radical climate agenda, efforts to tie up conventional energy production, force the widespread adoption of electric vehicles, and even go after things like household appliances. Mr. President, those days are over. We're no longer regulating our way to the Green New Deal. President Trump has moved swiftly to unleash energy production and remove regulatory barriers. And Republicans in Congress are joining those efforts. To date, we've passed a number of resolutions blocking Biden-era regulations through the Congressional Review Act. And we'll continue those efforts this week. Later today, we'll vote on a resolution blocking the Biden administration's onerous appliance standards regulation, an effort that's going to be led here in the Senate by Senator Husted. This rule imposed stricter reporting requirements on a number of household appliances. Dishwashers, dehumidifiers, pool heaters, air conditioners, light bulbs, and the list goes on. Reporting and certification requirements may not sound like much, Mr. President, but there is a lot of front-end work that has to be done, work that costs time and money and can place a huge burden on businesses and drive up prices for consumers. In his public comments on the Biden administration's appliance standards, Carrier, an appliance manufacturer, said the Department of Energy failed to adequately account for, and I quote, the cost and burden to comply with updated requirements, end quote. A manufacturers association said that the proposed reporting standards had, and I quote, no practical utility, end quote. And another objected to what they called burden without benefit. Mr. President, the same could be said of another Biden-era regulation we'll be voting to overturn later this week. Last year, the Biden administration finalized a rule setting stricter standards for commercial refrigerators and freezers. These are the refrigerators and freezers that we see at convenience stores, in restaurants, and at grocery stores. In other words, it impacts a lot of small operators. And these stricter standards threaten to drive up costs and reduce choice for the owners of these businesses. Costs that, I might add, will inevitably be passed on to consumers in the form of higher prices. Proponents of this rule claim more efficient appliances will save businesses money in the long run. But in the case of at least one new standard, the Department of Energy estimates that it will take more than 90 years for a business to see those savings. In other words, longer than any business owner will survive at the head of his or her business. And so I thank Senator Moody for leading this effort to eliminate the unnecessary burden on America's small businesses. Mr. President, this week the Senate is also taking up Senator Curtis's resolution to overturn the Biden administration's major source rule. This rule isn't just burdensome, it's backwards. The Clean Air Act has two categories of pollutants, major source and area source. Major source pollutants are more heavily regulated. But the Biden administration's rule says that even if you reduce potential emissions below the threshold established in law for classification as major source pollutants, that doesn't matter. You're still subject to the stricter major source rules. Once in, always in. Mr. President, that's wrong. And worse, it removes an incentive to reduce emissions, undermining the very purpose of the Clean Air Act. So this week, the Senate will vote to eliminate this backward regulation. Mr. President, we've made progress on reining in excessive regulation, and the American people can count on Republicans to continue our efforts. We know that rules out of Washington can frequently have very negative consequences in the real world. Complying with a new rule costs money that could otherwise go toward innovation, improvements, or investing in employees. For small business owners, a new regulation can mean late nights trying to figure out what it means and how to make the business work while following the rules. And regulations can lead to higher costs and less choice for consumers. That's why we believe that regulatory power should be used judiciously. And it's why we're committed to eliminating rules that impose unjustified burdens.
Schumer discussed President Trump's record on the economy.
Mr. President, Americans woke up this morning to some very troubling news. The economy shrank in the first quarter of 2025 by 0.3%. It shrank. It was growing until now. It shrank. It's the worst quarter in years. Businesses, families, and consumers are bracing themselves for the hammer blow of Donald Trump's tariffs, and it's sending the economy into a tailspin. Today's GDP numbers show that Donald Trump is running America the same way he ran his businesses, into the ground. Before our very eyes, Donald Trump's policies of tariffs and tax hikes are strangling the economy. Donald Trump's first 100 days have been defined by one big F word: failure. Donald Trump's first 100 days have been defined by an F word: failure. Failure on the economy, failure to lower costs, failure on foreign policy, failure on democracy, failure everywhere you look. Donald Trump must admit his failure and reverse course and immediately fire his economic team. Otherwise, we'll see more of the same: failure and chaos and total incompetence. His tariff strategy, total failure. China's not coming to the table. Manufacturing's not racing back to our shores. There's no strategy, only chaos. Every day, he changes his mind. One day he says yes to tariffs, the next day no. One day this country's on the list, the next day that country's on the list. No tariffs, double the tariffs, on and on and on. And as he's doing this, his policy advisors have different explanations for what he's doing and why he's doing it. Businesses pay the price for Donald Trump's failed policies. When businesses don't know what the president will do next, they can't plan for the failure. They're not going to hire workers. I've talked to business leaders, small businesses, medium-sized businesses, and big businesses in New York, and I'm sure this is true around the country. They're holding off on any new spending because they don't know what Donald Trump will do next. His chaos is just totally impeding our economy. We're seeing it happen in real time. And because the tariff policy has been such a mess, such a failure, later today, Senators Wyden, Kaine, and I will force a vote here in the Senate to stop Donald Trump's trade wars. Our Republican colleagues have an opportunity to stop Donald Trump. Our resolution presents Republicans with a choice: stand with Donald Trump or stand with American families. The GDP number today should be a wake-up call to Republican senators now more than ever. 4 voted with us last time on tariffs about Canada. Many more should vote with us this time, given the new numbers and given that this resolution covers all of the countries that Donald Trump has so failed with on tariffs. Senate Republicans know deep down that Donald Trump's tariff policies are awful for their states, so they have to choose today: stick with Trump or stand with your states. But the failures don't stop there, just at tariffs. What about his promise to bring down costs? Again, failure. Failure to bring down costs. Grocery prices are up. Housing is up. Rent and housing are up. The price of new car is up. Household appliances are up. Big retailers are warning that Donald Trump's trade war will make the problem far, far worse. And foreign policy, total failure. Putin's emboldened. China's not coming to the table. Our allies are all losing trust. He's ready to break up the European alliance over Ukraine. Doge, total failure. Elon Musk took the big game of cutting waste, reducing fraud. But Doge is attacking Social Security, attacking veterans' care, attacking cancer research. That's not cutting waste, Mr. Musk. That doesn't make the government more efficient. That puts a dagger to the programs that America needs, which makes our country strong. The list goes on. Rooting out corruption, failure. Transparency, failure. Rule of law, failure. Economic optimism, failure. It's one big F word, failure. And while our economy sinks in real time, while consumers get saddled with Donald Trump's tariffs, Republicans are complicit. They're his co-conspirators. They're aiding and abetting Donald Trump as he cuts taxes for billionaires. They're aiding and abetting Donald Trump as he wants to obliterate Medicaid. They're aiding and abetting Donald Trump as he wants to add $52 trillion to the national debt. They want to help the richest of the rich while telling the working people to get lost. The Republican agenda boils down to 5 dismal words. Billionaires win, American families lose. This is a recipe for failure, if there ever has been one. Finally, as Donald Trump destroys our economy, the American people cannot and will not stand by as he also tries to destroy our democracy. Donald Trump is everything the Founding Fathers worried about when they wrote the Constitution. They feared a man who would see the rule of law as a nuisance, who considers the truth as an inconvenience, and who regards his fellow citizens as little more than subjects. Either kiss the ring, bow before the throne, or watch your back. That's the ethos of Donald J. Trump. Republicans howled at the moon for years about weaponizing government, but no president in American history has weaponized the government like Donald Trump has in 100 days. The Department of Justice has become his personal henchman. He is assaulting freedom of the press. He's assaulting our education system and institutions of higher learning. His deportation force is expelling American citizens with no due process. Let me repeat that. Donald Trump is deporting American citizens with no due process, and the American people don't like it. One of the traits of a dictator is someone hostile to all forms of accountability, to all forms of criticism. That is Donald Trump to a T. He's scared of debate. He's scared of opposition. He can't stand the ideas of others disagreeing with him. So instead, he tries to crush anything he views as opposition. That is not strength. That's a sign of deep, deep, deep insecurity. The more Donald Trump tries to take America down this ominous road, the more he'll face resistance. Democrats will oppose his agenda, the courts will oppose his attack, and most of all, the American people will resist his hostile takeover of our democracy.
Thanks for listening. This program is copyrighted by Federal Network, Incorporated, and provided only for informational and educational purposes. Unauthorized reproduction, distribution, or use of this episode without expressed written permission from FedNet is prohibited.